Good evening, Fancy. Welcome to this session of Interview with the Raj Yogi. And our topic today is the power to overcome obstacles. As usual, we'll start with the reflections. It very often feels as we go through the day that we have an idea in our mind of how we'd like the day to go. And then there's what actually happens. The day can turn into a battle. Challenges to how we would like the day to go. Obstacles to the perfect day. As I go inside, I reflect on what actually creates the experience of something being an obstacle or a challenge. Is it completely just what's going on outside? Or do aspects of my own inner world, myself, play a part in creating the experience of an obstacle? Is there some adjustment, some change inside that can transform an obstacle into an opportunity? What role does self-mastery play in overcoming obstacles? Om Shanti. Om Shanti. Welcome to those who've joined Interview the Raj Yogi. If you've just come into the room, the topic is the power to overcome obstacles. So it's quite illuminating when you were doing the commentary, because I was suddenly thinking about, for those who may have heard of it, but the pure thinking course versus the positive thinking course came to mind. Mm-hmm. And the reason why it came to mind in terms of being able to see something as an obstacle versus an opportunity, that do you feel that there is some sort of parallel? I think probably what they both share is this idea of desiring. That when looking at the positive thinking versus the pure thinking, the suggestion, positive thinking may have a lot to do with what I would like to happen and putting a lot of my thought power into fulfilling that desire. And this can also be the source of experiencing something as a challenge or an obstacle or something bad happening, is that it's not so much that something bad is happening, but it's that what I want to happen is not happening. So again, my desires being frustrated creates the feeling of an obstacle. So because this word reframing can come up, and I've heard you use it, but I feel that you're using it in a much more limited way. But I have heard that being used in day-to-day life too. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a challenge, just reframe it in a certain way. And I guess what came up during the commentary was, is there a possibility that there is sort of a backdrop sense of awareness that I don't realize in terms of my identity that could always be running in the background in terms of seeing something, in terms of coping, versus going into a reality of who I truly am? Yeah, when we look at Raj Yoga, which informs these conversations, and the idea of
reframing or any other transformation that we want to look at, it's always starting with the reframing of the self. So it's not, the understanding that if I actually shift my sense of self, I will naturally feel differently about what's going on. There's a very interesting story I heard early in my Brahmin life, trying to make it very short. But basically, there's a group that's in an outing in the jungle and includes a father and son. There's a guide, there's others, and they're out in the jungle in an outing, and the son's a little boy. So there's a lot of purity in the little boy, a lot of things that haven't yet shaped his ideas of himself or the world. So he's running around, sometimes ahead, and in this case, he's run ahead. And when they catch up, they find that he's staring in wonder at his thumb, which probably doesn't seem that odd, but there's a big thorn stuck through his thumb. And he's just staring at it in absolute wonder. There's no suggestion of anything else other than wonder on his face. And then the guide comes up to him and very, very gingerly starts to try to extract this thorn, but the expression on the guide's face is one of really like, oh, this must be so painful, as if that's what he must be experiencing. The little boy, this must be so painful. And at that point, the boy really starts to learn a different way of being and starts to experience the pain of the thorn, which he had not felt at all before. So it's quite an extreme story, but the idea being that if we can go to the very seed, when we say unlimited, it's not so much I'm trying to cover every possibility out there. If I just change one thing, the common denominator in every situation is me. So it will become unlimited if I go through a transformation such that I naturally experience things going on around me differently. And that's why we focus so much on a very different experience of the self, which we call spiritual.
Just when you were sharing, I felt that perhaps maybe that's why I have heard that souls really grapple in those two. Well, it was originally the positive thinking course and called the pure thinking, but when it changed to pure thinking, souls really grappled with this understanding of what it means to be thinking and seeing in an unlimited way. And I wonder if it's because of just that very, just that very sense of self is not very clear. And trying to tell someone, when they're not actually in that sense of paradigm shift, it's really hard for them to try to put themselves in the shoes of someone who actually is feeling a complete different sense of self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we do just try to focus on that consciousness as opposed to everything out there.
But still, it seems to be very challenging. So is there a point in having that pure thinking versus positive thinking discussion?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, some might say they sound semantics words, so eventually you want to maybe put aside the words and really look at what is the most important thing to focus on. And again, what's that common denominator? If I look at just positive, and again, everyone has different ideas of what these words mean, but being so outcome focused, so outward focused, using my inner powers to manipulate what's going on out there while I stay the same. So that, yes, I might be able to address this situation, but there's going to be another situation and another situation. It's going to get very exhausting versus let me just do one thing. It's far more efficient. Let me use my inner resources to address me, what's going on in here. And then I will experience every other situation that's going to come in a very different way. So the solution in one strike versus having to repeatedly labor because I, the experiencer, and that's the thing, is we're talking about how we experience, and it's amazing that we're very attached to the formula of what's going on out there is shaping how I experience, which leaves me really at the mercy of what's going on out there, versus maybe how I experience what's going on out there has more to do with me than anything else. So to address the seed of the issue.
It's interesting. I felt that it's very important that we discuss this aspect of what is my sense of self before we even talk about what does it mean to overcome an obstacle. Because it does seem like it really depends on what my experience is. And it really does bring up this conversation as well in terms of physical power and spiritual power. So what is the difference between the two? I know you were touching a bit on this laboring that happens when we're not in the right awareness.
So I often think of the different capacities and faculties we have. I think of them as a bit like rings of a tree, and the outermost is physical. And then next to that, is that mental, and the next emotional, and the deepest one is spiritual. And so I could address the outer ring, physical, but all the inner rings are still unaddressed. So they're still very vulnerable. I could go, keep going one layer deeper, but I could address all the rings if I just address the central one, because it ripples out. So this feeling of looking at the spiritual state of the self, I, the spiritual being, address that. It's amazing how it will address all the other aspects. If I only address a surface aspect, say the physical, then there's still going to be so much, the major obstacles aren't even going to be out there. They're all going to be things that come up inside: mental distress, emotional distress, the anxiety, because I haven't addressed that innermost ring. So a lot of energy will be battling just with the self.
It feels like our topic is very much related to last week's topic. Maybe it wasn't last week, it just seems so long ago, but it was talking of self-respect and respect for others. Mm-hmm. Because I was realizing the souls are grappling with their emotions and things that are going on in their life, and we certainly don't want to feel like we're negligible in terms of what souls are feeling. But if we really could truly feel that we are eternal, nothing can hurt me, nothing can touch me, then would it be very natural that that it doesn't really matter what is happening around me? I think that that's part of the conversation that happened in our last topic, or even just recent ones, in terms of this feeling of injustice. Mm-hmm. Things happen and it's wrong, that doesn't feel right, whatever it is, towards yourself or others. But if I was to really go into that reality, I'm eternal, everyone else is eternal, I can see why souls are trying to grapple with accepting that things are okay if they haven't gone there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it sort of becomes an intellectual exercise, and we actually won't be able to answer the question until we actually do go there, and then we'll know for ourselves whether or not it actually is effective. But I think we know what it's like to be in a situation where we have one position in the situation versus another, where we're invested or we're not invested. I remember when I worked for an organization that had multiple branches, and I was connected to the head office, so really belonged to all the branches. I always found it interesting when I was in a meeting, because that was the position, that was my awareness, is that I don't belong to any one branch, I belong to all the branches. But in the meeting with all the representatives, their position was, I am here representing my branch. And that word "my" is actually the one that creates obstacles. I am representing my branch. And the meeting I always found very interesting because I could see that they were becoming very passionate about their particular branch and the needs of their branch, and others were an obstacle to fulfilling the needs of their branch, and the money had to be divided and the resources. And I remember feeling completely neutral myself because there was no feeling of my branch. It was always just a sense of what's going to benefit everyone. So there's a lot of, we use the word detachment, but this "my" was not there. It was more of a sense, of course, of ours, the collective benefit, but there wasn't any sense of mine. Literally, the feelings were completely different in such a natural way. So it's the power of consciousness. These two words, I and mine, can either create opportunities or create obstacles. How we experience them, and we can't know it. It can't be a theoretical exercise. Theoretically, I would feel this way, but it's not my reality. So it won't work. It won't go deep into the emotional, etc. I'll still feel very anxious. But if it's my reality that this really isn't mine, and I'm really not this sort of limited being, this mortal, then if that's my reality, not a theory, but practical, then there's no question about it. I would feel differently. I think we've all experienced that in limited examples.
So it really is, when we're talking about the power of overcoming obstacles, it's really the power of consciousness. And it's about if I'm experiencing anything to be an obstacle or not.
Yeah, it's, really, I think that's the beauty of a robust spiritual practice, is that it's able to get to things at the seed. And we do have powers. There's definitely the power of thought, power of attitude, power of feelings, but those powers can almost be abused if they're not in the hands of the right consciousness.
Very true. And I guess it's not really trying to have any judgment over this. I'm not sure what you call it, a series or something that came out more than 10 years ago called The Secret. That I can have powerful thoughts and make things happen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, we can. There is power, and I, as a side note, our thoughts are powerful, but we again like to remember they're powerful at selected times. But the bottom line is they're always powerful. Every thought we create is powerful, not just during a crisis, but as you go through the day, those thousands of thoughts, every single one is sending a ripple out into the world. So on a side note, all thoughts are powerful. But because of that, it can be a blessing or a curse. It's like having a really incredible tool, and what hands is that tool in? We joke about electronics right now. We're all listening on our devices, and sometimes people curse, technology. And of course, technology is just doing whatever the user wants. It depends on the hands that the technology is in. It could be used for bullying, or it could be used for benefiting. It depends on the user. So every resource, the gross ones, the technology, the physical ones, and also the subtle ones, thoughts, attitudes, it depends on the state of the user. And if my state is very self-serving, then it has repercussions.
So I was reminded of, I know we don't particularly give that course here, at least at this center, but the course of the 8 powers of the soul. You've been in this study for over 25 years. I'm not sure if you noticed that. Like, why was there a change of not offering it anymore?
I think actually it's still offered a lot.
No, but here at this
Here, yeah. I think it's sadly quite colored by my own personal that I feel it's so important to master consciousness. Knowing the powers are very important. The 8 powers are very important to be aware of, but it can get sidelined. Like there can be such a distraction from where those powers come from. They're all soul power. So I kind of put aside the seed of them and start to kind of focus on the results without actually having the foundation. So we're noticing there just needs to be a lot more attention on soul, and then realizing that all these powers come from soul consciousness. So without soul consciousness, I don't get the powers. So people would start to kind of go for the powers without soul consciousness.
Because they seem so attractive and
They're
appealing.
very attractive. They really are the foundation of a happy life. The power to tolerate, the power to accommodate, the power to back up. These are brilliant powers, but they're not going to happen without soul consciousness, with their spiritual powers.
Say it just then becomes natural. These different powers becomes very natural. And for those who are regular students, it's often posed in class that you're, at this situation, it would be more useful your power if you had the power to tolerate versus the power to accommodate. And not about getting into the being stuck in the words, but it always feels like as if there's a lack of accuracy when we're really asked to really check in. And I wonder if it's, instead of segmenting all of the powers, it's about, am I really in reality?
The powers themselves and the expression of the powers, again, are all based on, yes, being in that consciousness or that reality or that right alignment. Then it all happens quite naturally. But if I'm not, then it's again theoretical, and so it becomes a bit unnatural.
So basically backing things up very, very far behind us to, do I even just have the faith, open to considering myself to be a soul?
Yeah, I think if I'm not really believing, that's the foundation of spirituality. So if I feel that spirituality is important and I want to start to live in a spiritual way, then obviously I need to look at the very essence of spirituality. And I personally believe, and I could be wrong, that somewhere deep down, either overtly or covertly, everyone believes they're a soul. But it is quite frightening to explore that, because soul consciousness does demand letting go of so much that is familiar, even if it's painful. It will demand that we let go of so much is familiar, and letting go is not something that we are great at when we've lost power.
But wouldn't letting go actually also be natural if there were certain things inside that were placed? Because it starts to become an impression of impressions that souls have, that spirituality has had a history of asceticism, and that this Raj Yoga isn't about that you're letting go of things to be bereft and to suffer.
Yeah, we can definitely explore, that yes, it's not going to be asceticism or poverty or denial. There's a great deal attained through this letting go. We're actually letting go of everything that causes sorrow. If that's understood, then it's very natural. But it's a challenge even to be able to get that far, to recognize. And also the degree of letting go without that recognition is absolutely terrifying. But if there is that recognition, it seems to take, some get it very quickly, some it takes time, all of that's fine. But without the realization or recognition, then I can only go so far.
So really what precedes letting go to be able to basically move from one, just transformation, I suppose. It really does start with recognition.
It does. I mean,
So that's a power in itself.
It is, yeah, and a readiness of the soul. I mean, I see so many limited examples. I know when in the fitness where I am very involved, and souls can have a very specific idea and comfort inside of what fit looks like, what it's like to be fit, and they are terrified to let that go. You know, that if they let that go, they will lose their value. So they will push themselves to injury because they cannot let go. So letting go isn't easy without realization.
Backing things up a little bit, for those, you may have taken the course, and about the 8 powers of the soul. You know, not like it really practically matters at this moment, but there's the power. You have to help me out here. I always get the power to merge, the power to pack up all mixed up. There's the power to let go, the power to merge. There's the power to tolerate, the power to accommodate, the power to discriminate or discern, the power to decide, the power to face, the power to cooperate. But the reason why I'm bringing them up, because this came on very early on in my study of Raja Yoga, is that the power to detach, which is letting go, is one of the powers. You can't ask a soul to do that because the soul needs power. It's one of the 8 powers. And sometimes we talk about, well, why focus on one power or another if you just focus on soul consciousness? So wouldn't detachment be very natural? Again, if that is something I focus on, not detachment directly, it's just that recognition I'm a soul and going into that reality.
Yeah. Part of being able to detach, or sometimes we say pack up, but part of that is because it's not connected to loss, which has been connected to it in a physical sense. If I let go of something, I don't have it anymore. So there's a feeling of loss. It's the exact opposite in spirituality. And I think, you know, we can certainly play with that in the reflection, but you actually fill up when you let go, but that's spiritually. So the power to withdraw is often will precede the power to let go. It's suggestion that there's a replacement going on. I don't let go until I experience an attainment. So we say withdrawal, which is really going to that soul consciousness, that introversion. I'm experiencing something that's an attainment, and then yes, letting go is so natural.
It's like going into another room where you left another room to another room. Well, that clarifies a lot. At least it's been lots of improvements for myself, but that at least just small, maybe just a small detail, but I can understand now. I just recall some of the earlier courses asking souls to try to be a detached observer. I cannot imagine asking a soul. I mean, there's mindfulness, but to really be a detached observer of things going on inside and outside, I can see why souls just want to tune themselves out. You have no place that you can experience something different.
Yeah, you first have to be moved into a different space of experiencing. You literally have to stand somewhere else. So, you know, if I was on a stage, a theater stage, and I'm in the play and they say, okay, I want you to be an observer, I need to stand in the wings or in the aisles. I need to stand somewhere else to be an observer. It's very difficult to do it while you're in it. So we often have this feeling of it's still happening, but it's as if we say you're watching from a distance, that you're standing in the wings from a very stable, mature space, a real different feeling of the self. I'm standing there and watching what's going on. So I'm not repressing, but I am given a different place to stand, to watch, as if I'm watching someone else, an actor on the stage.
So with that same parallel, because we're not talking about a physical position, So what does that mean? Because I can see souls like trying to understand that. But in terms of, I suppose it's back to, this word position. What is your position on this? What is your position on that? But ultimately is what kind of world I live in terms of how I see things.
One of the aspects we look at in the Raj Yoga course is having a very full, if you will, introduction to ourselves, getting the whole story. It turns out we only have a very small part of the story on ourselves. And if we can get the full story, we literally are given a different position to stand in. So if you can imagine a play where we often use the word amnesia, but where the character suddenly finds himself in this place and they have amnesia and they're just trying to take cues from everything around them to define who they are and what's going on. And someone comes along and says, actually, you are the king of a royal family in this kingdom, and this is, what's happened, and this is so a very full story, and they stand there. It's going to give them a different experience of what is going on, and hopefully understanding of how they've been behaving. They've really been doing the best they could in a state of amnesia without knowing who they are. So it's very compassionate. We really need a much more full understanding of ourselves to give us that other place to stand. So it's understanding that provides a position.
There was another topic that I felt so relevant to this aspect you're talking about, is that I really need to really have a good grasp of grinding and deeply this reality of being a soul. It can't just be something intellectual. If I really want to really experience something and not be just something theoretical.
Yeah, ultimately what we're talking about, as an example, I go by the name Judy. We're really, when we say your soul, it's basically saying, I'm not really Judy. Judy is the name I've been given in this birth. It's actually the name of the body. It's literally like, actually, no, you're a soul and you have this whole other, very full sense of self. So it's this massive shift that needs to happen. And what tends to happen is we stay stuck in Judy and try and experience all of it while still being stuck in Judy. And it's like, no, you need to get out of that very limited sense of self to really experience it.
When you think it out of that limited sense, would you say that I would have to have a real full sense of the experience of myself to be a soul? Then I can really actually not be caught up in the limited. I can't really, unless my sense of self is really formed and clear, I can't really let go of the old sense of what I think I am. Well, I think that we're coming close to the end of our session, so we'll have a reflection.
One of the main causes of experiencing something to be a challenge, a difficulty, an obstacle is attachment. I'm attached to wanting things to be a certain way, attached to what is familiar, to what I perceive as right, valuable. So obviously the solution would be to let go. How do we let go? I go inside and can see clearly that my mind has developed a deep habit of holding tight. Tight to expectations, perspectives, beliefs, attitudes, providers. The hand of my mind is constantly holding tight. Even when it's uncomfortable, the signs I'm holding tight are anxiety, stress, fear, fatigue, irritation, impatience, all signs that my mind is holding tight. So just at this moment, I'm going to exercise one of light by holding tighter, but permission to let go. To have that thought, that single thought of allowing whatever is happening in this moment, just allowing it to be exactly as it is. I want to know what it feels like to let go. But that will require changing the experience of I. In a limited state, there is no power to let go. But in a spiritual state, letting go comes naturally. I am this being inside the body. I am the one that gives life to this body. And I exist beyond the bounds of this body. This body is temporary, perishable. I, the being I am, eternal. And so much freedom in remembering my true self. Tiny spark of soul. The fabric resides eternally okay. Everything will change around me, but I will continue. Always okay. Imperishable. My mind gently holding this experience without even noticing. The hand of my mind is open. On that open palm is just that single thought. I am the soul. Releasing my grip on all those limited aspects in order to experience the most important aspect, who I truly am. Join us on this Jana's Welcome to let us know if you have any topics that you would like shared, discussed, explored. You're welcome to always type in the chat box or email the center. And so, in terms of updates, there is a upcoming Raja Yoga course
also for the weekend, but it's in Hindi. You have to stay tuned in terms of if there's other workshops that will be happening in February as well. But the usual Soul Cafe on Saturdays at 2 p.m. Experience has had a fourth day that's added. 4 days, yes it is. So it's the Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, all at 6:30 to 7:30, which is also the same time on Sunday as well. So thank you again for joining us.